Hello and welcome to the Metapod podcast, Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta, the final Metapod podcast episode ever. Just kidding,
Oh,
April Fools. How are
you
you
fooled
doing?
me. You fooled me, Jake. I was like, because
What?
we didn't discuss this before. I was like, I had a Scooby Doo moment.
For anyone curious, we record on Mondays, which is April 1st, so it might not have been funny to everybody else, but for Sean and I, well, at least for me, it's kind of funny. Sean is still breathing heavily, you know.
I had a moment.
But Sean, how are you doing?
I'm good, Jake. Like you said, it's April Fool's, but April 1st. But I don't know. We've seen a couple of April Fool's Day things, but and we'll talk about one of them in a little bit. But otherwise, it's been a pretty normal day. Not a lot of April Fool's jokes in my world. What about you?
I hope that there's not a lot of April Fool's jokes for me today because I did my taxes today. So it's like I would really much like to not have an April Fool's moment at any point during that, but
TurboTax says, "Oh, you get a refund. April Fools."
psych. Even though, I have like a real job now, so I should have a tax return of actual money. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Today, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today with rotation now enacted. Right now, we are in brand new format alongside temporal forces.
Well, I will say, technically, rotation is Friday. Technically, it's Friday.
What I was trying to say is EUIC is coming up this weekend, and it's going to be a fun event with rotation and whatnot. So excited to see the tournament itself, even though like EUIC is awful timing for West Coast people. I will watch the VOD, can't watch it live. But anyways, excited. And plenty of other things are coming as well that we can talk about in this podcast today, both real and fake. It's it's your choice to decide which one is which,
True. I guess getting into it, Jake, I wanted to mention only one thing, and then I guess we can let the viewer decide what's real and what's fake. First piece of news as of today, Jake, breaking news.
I love this video.
Pokemon Sleep has announced that there is going to be a world championship. Can you believe that, Jake?
If you have not seen the video, it's like a 4-minute video, so like we're not going to show it really like the whole thing on this podcast, but I watched all of this and I loved every single second of it. It was so good. The production of it is really fun. It's just a really funny idea, and it's executed really, really well. I thought I saw Pokemon post another thing today. I'm going to try to find it for you, Sean.
I pulled up the video right now, Jake, for the viewers. So I turned the sound off, though, because I'm like, we don't need to listen to it. But I will say, props to the writers. It really got me. The two announcers are Chris Pillow and Kenny Mattress. So, that's good. That was some good stuff. But I'll stop it now. But as Jake said, go watch it.
It's funny too, because like on social media, on Twitter, Pokemon Sleep, posted this and promoted it, and like the official Pokemon TCG accounts like quote tweeted it and used hashtag Pokemon Sleep Champion Tournament 2024. Like a lot of the other accounts are like involved in this I'll just tell you right now, it's an April Fool's joke. It's a gimmick. It's a well put together gimmick, but
I will say,
just, man,
the end. So anyone who works in marketing and any of that stuff, there's usually at the end a lot of legal stuff of commercials. If you ever want a good laugh, I'll also say, Jake, watch car commercials and look for like the little text at the bottom of car commercials, either at the end or sometimes in the middle. There was a car commercial where like a car like jumped into the air really far, and some lawyer somewhere wrote in the little bottom, "Cars do not fly."
Cars don't fly, just in case.
I'm like, of course they don't. Wondering. I don't know why a lawyer, but anyways, it says on the end of this video is released on April 1st, 2024. So Now, it doesn't
Just
say April Fools. It just tells you when it was released.
I just think it would be really funny if like it was actually put into action, because like they show in the trailer of like the competitors like sleeping, right? And they were like, I trained a third of my life for this moment, you know, because like
Yeah.
the average human sleeps a third of their life. So it's just like it was a really, really good gimmick.
Jake.
Also, Sean wanted to talk about Sean originally had planned Nintendo Switch VR. And at first I thought it was real just reading the title, because like we've had the Switch for a while.
Yeah.
And so I'm like waiting for the next gen console for the Nintendo series. And so I was like, oh. And then I saw like the person with the VR headset like getting in their car and playing Mario Kart. And I was like, there's no way. There's no way.
There's no way.
It was believable until that one moment. And then at the very end, it's like, this is a parody.
Yeah.
So.
And I will say, Jake, there was this is a side note going back to, you know, how you said, oh, you know, it'd be really interesting if they actually did a Pokemon Sleep Championship. Did you know that Pokemon Go was the result of an April Fool's joke?
Well,
no. Do you want to know that? Do you remember this? Do you know the history of this?
No.
So Google Maps collaborated with Pokemon in, I want to say 2012, 2013, maybe 2014, somewhere in that window. Google Maps, Google used to be famous for its April Fool's jokes. For all of their different products, they used to do a bunch. And one year they did a Google Maps thing where you could, on Google Maps, wherever you are, there'd like be like Pokemon that pop up on the map and you could go catch them, right? All around the world or whatever. And it was an actual thing that they put into the Google Maps app for one day on April 1st. And if you were the person who and if you did it and you caught a bunch of Pokemon, I guess there was like some mechanic where like either you were entered into a random sweepstakes or whatever, but they said like somebody would be selected to be the official Pokemon master and get to like have a title at Google as Pokemon master.
Oh,
so
interesting.
That was so successful that Pokemon then reached out to Google, or vice versa, one of the two. But one of them reached out to the other and were like, hey, this was a wildly successful April Fool's joke. Do you want to try to make this happen? And Niantic had already built an AR game that it was called Ingress. And they'd already had all this base level technology that is what Pokemon Go is now. And so they were like, well, we can bring that technology, put a skin on it of Pokemon. And that's how the game was created, Jake. So that's your April Fool's real fact of the day.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize that I would be learning about this on the podcast today.
No, I just came to my brain, but I work in marketing. And so this was like a big, I was working when this like whole stunt came out. And then 2 years later, Pokemon Go was released.
I'm just surprised there's not any like fake card news that I've seen. I've seen it in like the One Piece community. Some people tried to get away with some fake like card reveals or whatever, breaking card reveals, and I was like, there's no way. And people are like, what do you mean? And I was like, no good marketing team actually releases news on April 1st. You know, it's like,
well, Jake, do you want to get into the next news story?
It's a little different on those, but anyways, yes, let's go into it.
Well, you say no real marketing team releases real news on April 1st, but Ultra Pro has announced
Ultra Pro is not a real company.
Shots fired. Wow. Okay, fair enough. I mean, Ultra Pro has announced that they are releasing nostalgic Pokemon TCG binders. Jake, what do they mean when they say nostalgic? Explain these binders.
So if anybody releases the binders from the 90s that were released by Nintendo, there were 4 different ones: a red one with Pikachu, a blue one with Charmander, a yellow one with Bulbasaur, and a purple one with Ash and Pikachu. We can confirm that these are actually real, mostly because Sean, well, the only confirmation that I have is Sean confirmed that he owned one of these, actually. So
yeah,
it's a callback. Sorry?
I was going to say, I owned the red one, and the render images for the new version look truly modern. They look like, okay, they're not just,
Yes, it's that same kind of style where it's like the Pokemon trading card game or the Pokemon logo right there, a solid color and a button seal basically on it. This is the blandest of all of it. I mean, obviously the quality of like the interior, right? It's 4 card page binders, right? But this is truly the definition of Ultra Pro because unlike the old ones that had Pokemon or like Ash on them, right? In those cut and pasted images, it's literally just the Pokemon trading card game logo that you see on like PTCGO or PTCG Live, right? And that's it.
Well,
there's no other designs besides the button being a Pokeball.
I was gonna say the button is a poke. I do like the button as a Pokeball. That's a little touch, but
it's simpler.
But yeah, it does kind of feel like
it's so Ultra Pro.
It looks so basic. And I told Jake I have like, so the original red one that I had actually it absolutely got ruined over the years. The plastic they used was terrible. But I also have this binder, which I've shown on the pod before. But this, it is, for those of you listening, it is the Pokemon binder that had Pikachu, Charizard, and Blastoise, like super old school art with like a graphical background and all the energy symbols on the bottom. I was
it's like the classic red, blue, and yellow video game, like sprites and whatnot, and like
and you got Venusaur on the back.
Pokemon art.
Yeah, Venusaur on the back. And I was telling Jake, I was like, well, who made this binder? And I was like looking around, and there's a Wizards logo, there's a Nintendo logo. I'm like, what? And then at the very bottom, Ultra Pro. So Ultra Pro also produced this binder. Bring this back, you cowards.
Yeah, look, you've already got the Pokemon trading card game logo, the same one that you used 25 years ago, right? You've already slapped that on there. Slap the other assets on there. I'm sure you can get them. I'm sure it wouldn't be that difficult. Anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. This is probably actually, I mean, in my opinion, if you're looking for a new, smaller binder, this will store 160 cards. This is a cool product to get, right? This is a cool binder to get. It is a stitched binder as well, so it's going to be durable on top of it, in my personal opinion. In there's no pricing information or anything like that. But Sean, do we know when this was coming out? I thought you said it, but I can't find it on here.
Sometime in September, yeah.
So it'll probably be like middle of September area. Maybe even, don't we usually get a set in September?
Yeah, well, we usually get either a special set, like a holiday set, or whatever the set is that comes out, like the third set of the year. It'll be in that window.
So it'll probably release alongside in there. It's acid-free, non-PVC materials for premium collection. If you're wondering about the sleeves that are loaded in, like the binder sleeves, they're deck protector sleeves. So if that means anything to you, I'm not 100% sure what that means, but it sounds good.
Sure.
And if you know binders and you know sleeves, then that probably means something to you. But I would assume it's probably pretty standard to what you usually see right now.
Yeah. It seems like you said a standard binder. It does have that retro feel. I mean, I wanted to bring this up because I did own the red binder at least, and I was like, it was a pretty dope binder, but if you really want to go retro, I'm like, Ultra Pro, go there. Just go there. Go all retro. So, anywho, the last little bit of news before we get into just Jake and I talking about EUIC.
This feels like an April Fool's joke.
This does. There is the piece of news is that they are announcing that they will be announcing Worlds dates for
announcing that they'll be announcing. This is, oh my gosh, this is quite clearly like to have an announcement of an announcement and specifically saying what the announcement of the announcement is going to be is a direct response to the backlash that everybody has been saying about why we don't have Worlds dates yet.
Yeah. I mean, anybody planning or wanting to go to Worlds, whether to compete or just to spectate and enjoy the festivities, like yeah, you just can't book tickets because you know it's August, but you don't know which weekend. And for comparison, last year, they had announced the dates in, I believe it was February.
On Pokemon Day.
On Pokemon Day. Yeah, I mean, usually sometime around there. And also, people that want to go, just give them as much time as possible. If you announce in February, you give them about 6 months to plan everything out. But announcing in April, that's 2 months less, basically, that you have to plan anything. And the further away you're traveling from, the worse that gets. So, yeah,
Obviously, we don't know exactly why it's taken so long, if it was intentional, if it has anything to do with like the Maui wildfires that have been going on right in Hawaii, which was the basis of a lot of criticism at the beginning when it was announced that it was going to be at Hawaii, because Hawaii's like, stop touring.
Yeah.
And then we kind of explained in a previous podcast that like these are decided well in advance of like less than 1 year, and you can listen to that podcast. I don't remember what episode it is, but you can find that. But it's going to be specifically during the EUIC closing ceremony, so they're going to start about Sunday, April 7th at 5:30 p.m. local time in Europe. So in America, it's going to be sometime in the morning.
Yeah. Very, very early morning, I guess, for you, Jake. Probably around 8 or 9.
Yeah. It's probably going to be, I'm trying to think of when Europe usually has tournaments. Well, it's an international championship, so it's going to be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? Sunday just being the final. So it's probably going to be on the earlier side of like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
I feel like, because usually the Sunday days don't go so late, especially in the trading card game. But it'll actually be after the trading card game, the Go, the VGC, and Unite. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, net, we'll find out at the end of the day or in the middle of the day here in America on Sunday. When
this time next week, we'll tell you when the World's dates are.
Yeah. Keep your radio dials tuned.
Yeah.
And that's honestly, that's all the news that was fit to print this week for Pokemon.
Yeah, not a lot of news, and I think that's usually pretty typical in terms of like the week leading into April Fools. I think a lot of people get worried about releasing news during that time, but especially with the idea of rotation, with the EUIC championships coming up, a lot of people are very centralized in their focus on, the tournaments, the format, what's it looking like at this point. So, Sean, we're going to talk a little bit about EUIC predictions. So, do you have a prediction or a hot take that you want to do? I've got one.
I mean, I know that a lot of people, I know Luke from Celio's network has talked about this and others. I think a lot of people are thinking that Chen Pao is going to be a very good play into the event. And I could very much see that. And my rationale for that is that Chen Pao can utilize Iron Hands, which will be a good play into Lugia, one, which also is supposed to be another good deck. So I don't know if you have a good matchup against Lugia. It's kind of I'm not really sure. Maybe not. But I know that hitting for weakness and being able to take extra prizes off of those Minchinos and the Chinchinos is would be beneficial. And then Chen Pao being able to stretch to hit those higher numbers. And just the fact that you don't have to worry about Path to the Peak in Chen Pao anymore helps a lot as well. So it seems as though if you were to poll the most people, the answer you might get the most right now is Chen Pao. Jake, what are you thinking?
Just building off of yours a little bit, this isn't my point, but I do want to talk about it a little bit more. I also think Chen Pao just gets a ton better with the Buddy Buddy Puffin. I think it's one of the better decks to utilize the Buddy Buddy Puffin, because Frigibax is so instrumental, obviously, to the deck and stabilizing it, but as well as Bidoof. And one of the things, though, that I think kind of puts Chen Pao over the edge in terms of like being from a pretty decent deck to being like a good, viable like contender to be one of the best decks in format, is actually Cypher Maniac's Code Breaking.
Yeah.
I think the combination of that new supporter with Bibarel is really, really good, right? Like I mentioned when we were talking about our set list, Mallow was really, really good with Zoroark GX. And I think this is kind of the next iteration of that with Cypher Maniacs Code Breaking and Bibarel, especially again with the Buddy Buddy Poffin type card that is in the deck that is findable off of Pokestops, right? You don't have to play Arvins anymore in your deck to be able to find like these lay down cards and things like that. So I think it's I really like Chin Pao right now, but I don't know if I'm ready to make it the best deck, but I think it's a better deck, and I think it's a really cool deck going into this weekend. But I think personally, I don't know if this is a hot take, I think Future Hands is way overrated. I don't think it's that good of a deck. I think it's a deck that just like runs hot and just feeds off of Lugia, but I think it just takes way too much to be consistent, right? I think you're very dependent on your opponent not having something like the Lost Vacuum or something like that to be able to battle it. And just with electric generators in general, right? Like if the generators don't hit like in Miraidon, it's really tough. Except the difference between Future Hands and Miraidon is that Miraidon at least has a Flaffy, right, that can hit the field, where you don't have that. You just have, what do you have in terms of energy acceleration? That's not, I mean, you have the baby Miraidon, but you're not using peak acceleration for more than one turn at a time, right? So I think Iron Hands EX is overrated, but I do think that one gets into the top 8 for sure.
You think one Turbo Hands makes it top 8?
Yeah, I think one Turbo Hand. Yeah, I just think someone runs hot with it. I think they just hit enough of the good matchups and they just do well. I mean, how does Iron Hands beat Chin Pao? I mean, you'd have to arm press it, and you'd have to have a couple Cobalt commands.
I can tell you from experience. I played my Turbo Hands against my friend's Chen Pao list. And I would argue that his list is probably more optimized because he had like taken it from like, he like net decked it properly. And then mine was like kind of net decky, but also kind of like my own weirdness.
But got your own flavor.
Yeah, I got my own flavor. But net, I do think that the way that I play Turbo Hands, I play 4 Iron Crowns. And I know that some lists are opting for just 3 because they're like, well, that 4th one, what are the odds you get all 4 out? You know, what does that extra 20 damage really matter? I think if you have all 4 Iron Crowns, you can beat Chen Pao. Not easily, but you definitely have a pretty fair matchup, in my opinion, because you can take your first knockout by hitting into a Chen Pao with Miraidon and powering something up. And then if you follow up and take 3 prizes, right? So that way, if you go second, you're taking 3 prizes. They've only taken 1, and they'll take another 2. But then after they hit you, you go in with another Iron Hands. Then you have 4 Iron Crowns, and you attach a future booster to your Iron Hands, and that puts him at 220, which knocks out the second Chen Pao, and it's checkmate. It's all 6 prizes right there, right? So
interesting.
I do think that there is a way, but you have to build your deck with all 4 Iron Crown for that to work. If you don't have all 4 Iron Crown, I think it's actually a bad matchup because Chen Pao is going to be way more consistent at taking knockouts than you are. And like you said, I think anyone going to EUIC, here's my big prediction, Jake. The fact that Path to the Peak doesn't exist anymor means means a lot of decks probably don't need to play nearly as many, if any, stadiums as counters.
I agree.
And what they can do with that space is actually swap it out for 1 or 2 Lost Vacuums, because between things like Turbo Hands being really reliant on Heavy Baton, and things like the Hero's Cape and some of these new like Ace Spec tools that are really important. I think that combination of cards makes Lost Vacuum incredibly valuable right now. So, I think you have to. You can play it a certain way, and it has a decent matchup. But in general, unless you've built it that way, I don't think it's a great matchup. To your maybe point,
I have seen a lot of people. I've seen a couple lists pop up, especially when you talk about the one of the online events the other day, the Redacted Gaming tournament that they did. There was like over 200 people that played in the event. There's a couple Espathra Zatu decks in here in like the top 25, and I don't think it's a great deck, but I would love to see an Espathra Zatu actually go insane in EUIC.
Yeah, I mean, look here. I think there probably will be some deck that is not really that high on anybody's radar. Whether that's Espartha, whether that is
is it
Bramblecast.
Espartha or Espathra?
I don't know. I say Espartha.
But there's no R in there.
Oh, is there not?
No.
Wait, but is the R after the th or before the th?
Yeah.
Oh, then it's Espathra. Okay, then you're right. You're right.
I don't know. There was somebody on Twitter that was like, no content creator knows how to pronounce this Pokemon's name. I mean, and I'm just waiting for the casters to say it.
I guess the only reason I say Espathra kind of reminds me of Mothra, which is fine. Maybe that's the point. But Espartha reminds me of how you say, like, I don't know. It just sounds like a Spanish word. Which
I thought you were saying Spanish Pokemon. This is Sparta.
Is Esparta. Like maybe it's a Spanish word. Who knows? But my point was whether that Bramblegast, I think Wigglytuff. I've even been playing around with a Revavroom deck, Jake.
Revavroom? Oh God. Bless your soul. Are you at least having fun?
Oh, it was great. I had an opponent. I had an opponent playing a a Goldango deck, and then he just sat there like, I can't ever knock this out. What? I can't do anything. He just gave up.
Because you just put a bunch of tools on it. Now that there's no path to the peak, right? Like all those tools stick.
Yeah.
Unless there's like Klefki or what's the new Fluttermane?
Maybe, yeah. Like unless it's one of those, but since nobody's gonna be running that probably. I was like, I did the math, Jake. And did you know that Revavroom, if it is untouched and you have 3 rigid bands, a Hero's Cape, you attacked the previous turn, and you have the new Metal Stadium, it has an effective HP of 530.
That's bonkers.
Which means it can survive.
Somebody break it.
Which means it can survive a Radiant Charizard hit, even with weakness.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. Because I mean, that has to have, what damage modifiers do we have for Radiant Charizard? Just Vitality Band?
Even Vitality Band would not get there. You'd have to have defense band.
That would be 520.
You'd have to defense band it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's probably not a good deck, but I think there's like enough weirdness in the format right now, Jake, that like there's gonna be something real weird that just kind of like sneaks its way up the ladder.
Now, here's the question. The deck that's real weird that sneaks its way up the ladder, I'd love to hear your opinion on this. Do you think it's a grass deck or a lightning deck?
I think that the deck that sneaks its way is a grass deck, because I think lightning is, I think we know what the good lightning cards are right now. And I think that would be probably either some Iron Hands, whether that's Iron Hands in Chen Pao or Iron Hands in Turbo Hands or Iron Hands in Miraidon. I think that your electric type deck, the only one that maybe stands out that could sneak in is maybe the new Raichu, but I don't see that happening. I don't think the card is that good. But so I think lightning is relatively figured out. So if anything is going to be sneaking, I think it's definitely grass, because people are going to play Charizard, and Charizard is a good deck. So
what does Miraidon look like right now?
well, Jake, I'm
I'm
glad
trying
you
to find a
asked.
deck list. I'm trying to find a deck list of Miraidon, and I don't see
Jake,
anything.
do you want to know my other concoction?
I do.
Miraidon Raging Bolt.
Oh, you put Raging Bolt in there?
Uh-huh. It's really good. It's genuinely
With the
really good.
Oh no, so you
No
put
Sandy
like
Shocks.
Miraidon in there without the Sandy Shocks. Okay.
It's Miraidon, it's Raikou. It's got a couple of squawkabilities for early game consistency. It's got Raging Bolt, but you also get Electric Generator, and you got Professor Sada. So you have 2 lines of attackers, because that was my problem with the Sandy Shocks line, is that you rarely attack, if ever, I think, with Sandy Shocks. It's not really an attacker, it's more of a bench sitter. But in the other deck, I was like able to because it's really hard to get a good attack off going second with Raging Bolt, because Sandy Shocks doesn't come online until your opponent's taken 2 prizes, right?
Yeah.
So early game, you really just have Sada attached to 10. That's a feels bad amount of damage, let's be frank.
Yeah.
But if you play the Miraidon Electric Generator build, it's going to be one that's a little bit more RNG focused, but you can easily go second and do your Raikou thing, right? Attack, get some things off. You throw some Bravery Charms and Heroes Capes in there to make it awkward for your opponent to respond KO. You can still play for a Sealstone in the deck. And then you can have a late game plan of Raging Bolt instead. So I don't know. I really like that deck. So in my opinion, that's, I think, what Miraidon should be.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Man, I really want Dialga to be good. I want it so bad. The Metangs are just so cool, being able to like find the energies and then like put them at the bottom, right? To really like. And I've actually been playing like some other decks in other games, because Pokemon, you don't really see a lot of this. You see a lot of like, look at the top 5, and then whatever you don't choose, you shuffle it back in the deck.
Yep.
We really don't see a ton. I can't even recall the last thing at all that you could use multiple times in one turn. I know Iono, you put stuff at the bottom, and like Marnie, Marnie, you
no, Marnie was shuffling.
Oh wait,
I can't remember, but your point was like we didn't have a lot of like effects that you can keep going, where you're just effectively digging.
Yeah, and so like you Metang 3 times, right? And let's say your deck is 32 cards, right?
Sure.
You Metang 3 times. Let's just hypothetically say that you'll whiff on all of them, right? It's pretty tough when you're playing 16 energies in your deck, but I guess it can happen. You effectively know what over a third of your deck is, in what order.
Yeah.
Right? Or almost in what order, because you don't get to you shuffle and put it down at the bottom of the deck. You don't necessarily like put them in the order that you want to, but those top 20 cards, you know exactly like what's in there, right? If you've done your prize mapping, you've kept track of what's in your discard pile, things like that. And that can really effectively help you late game as well, right? If you're just playing more like research based things, no like real search options, things like that, which can be possible at some points in the game. You may know, like off this Radiant Greninja, I know I have 10 cards left, and I know what the bottom 8 are because of the Metang. I know what these 2 cards are that I'm going to draw. It makes like some really, really cool, thought-provoking deck building and deck playing that we don't see in Pokemon too often, and now is being present in Pokemon with this, that I've like experienced in other card games like One Piece, playing a lot of Nami, which if anybody knows One Piece, they know what Nami is, and they now know what kind of person I am. But Sean, do you know what Nami is?
No, I don't know what Nami does. The card. I know the character, but I don't know the card.
It's a deck where if you have 0 cards in deck at any point in the game, you automatically win.
Oh, so the deck just wants to turbo itself.
Yeah, it's a self-mill deck. It's my favorite deck. And so like it has opportunities to where like you can look at the top 5 and then place the rest at the bottom in the order that you like. And so there are times where I notice my life for prizes, I can directly, because in like One Piece, you don't get to search like you can in Pokemon. So your life for a lot of decks just stays hidden. But for Nami, I can pinpoint exactly what my life is. And, at the end of the game, I know exactly what the order of my bottom is. So I can plan out like 3 turns ahead what my game is going to be. And it just makes for really cool stuff, and that's just why I like Dialga so much with the Metang in this format. It's not as crazy as Nami, obviously, because you do have to shuffle and put it at the bottom, but it's still kind of like the start of that next level kind of gameplay. And I feel like a person who is going to go far in this event or whatever with Dialga, because it did win a major event in Japan, right? It can be a good deck.
I mean, hey, if you can do your thing in Dialga and take that extra turn, like how many games are just decided on the fact that somebody went first, or the fact that somebody whiffed an energy or an attack for a turn, or whiffed a knockout even? Like you could maybe even attack and just whiff a knockout. So getting an extra turn, like it's not surprising that in this format that just decides the game.
So I mean, I'm just really excited about this deck, and I think I'm still missing a couple cards like the entire Metang Beldum line, but I'm sure I can get it. I have the Dialgas because I'm a longtime Dialga guy.
But I will say, Jake, a lot of the pre-release kits had a Beldum Metang in it. So
I'm sure it's
ask around. You don't even have to go on TC. Just ask around your locals. People will have you. You got it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go to my shop and be like, "Do you have any Metang like bulk that I can just get?"
Yeah. But I will say, like, I think you're right to think that a deck that has always kind of sat around in the background, like Dialga, right now seems like it has a good shot, because Metang is just so much more consistent than Magnezone.
I think it's also because like you're somewhat limited on the decks that can one-shot you per se, because Charizard doesn't hit for weakness. So the only decks right now that really hit you for weakness is like Chin Pao, obviously. But you're also hitting Chin Pao for weakness, so you don't need as many energies to get going and whack that, because Chin Pao is
how does Chin
Pao's an ice type Pokemon.
But how does it hit Dialga for weakness? Isn't Dialga weak to
fire? I meant to say that it could one-hit KO.
Right. Like meaning they can just do enough damage.
I didn't. They can do enough damage to one-hit KO. I was getting a little ahead of myself as I shuffle 50 energies in my hand as I'm trying to talk. But
yeah.
So like Chin Pao can one-hit KO you. You shouldn't think really that future hands can one-hit KO. I don't think that's really a thing that can happen. Lugia maybe with the Chinchinos. It only takes 4 Chinchinos 4 energies on the Chinchino to knock you out, because of it's a 70 times. So if they put like gift energy, mist energy, therapeutic, anything but double turbo, it's going to be able to knock you out. And maybe that's just where Dialga struggles, is that matchup specifically, because Lugia is probably going to be one of the more popular decks heading into EUIC, in my opinion. But like Radiant Charizard can get you, and is that it?
I mean, I will say, I think the Lugia matchup, it actually probably, if depending on how you build the deck, if you play Prime Catcher with Dialga, let's say, and then you have counter catchers or boss's order, if you do the extra turn thing where you take out Archeops, and then you take the extra turn, take out the other Archeops, Lugia can't recover from that.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
that's a huge thing.
I'm just thinking about that, and I'm like, I think that's your game plan if you're Dialga against Lugia, is just focus down the Archeops and then do cleanup afterwards. Like they'll just scoop. They can't do anything.
Yeah, like how do you respond to that?
Yeah, exactly. So, what was I gonna say? Oh man, I had something in my mind. Oh, there's one card I actually want to mention, Jake, that I think maybe it's in Turbo Hands, and it's being slept on. And the card is the tool card Crisis Punch.
I have heard some people talk about that. I think it was like listening to Andrew Mahone's stream, and he talked about how some people were playing Crisis Punch. I don't know what that card is off the top of my head. Do you know?
I do. It's in my deck. I just threw it in there because I built it, and separately my mind went there because it's 3 energy. It's a TM card. It has the attack. You do 280 damage for 3 colorless energy. But you can only attack if your opponent has 1 prize card remaining. So think of it kind of like the slow bro. That takes
it's
2
like
prizes.
it's like when you're down like 2 prizes to 1, or it's at the very, very end of the game. You can just whack for a lot of damage with kind of almost little energy per se, in decks that can accelerate stuff.
Yeah, and the reason I think it's good in Turbo Hands is because Turbo Hands plays Miraidon, that single prizer. Your prize map usually is going to go, they knock out Miraidon, 1 prize, then down to 3, and then to 5. The amount of times that your opponent will probably end up in a single, like a 1 prize left situation is pretty high, right? If you have a normal game plan, then that's going to be your benefit. And then also in that deck, you're playing a lot of Arven because you want to find your heavy batons and your future booster capsules. So why not go, assuming that you didn't have to discard it for whatever reason, you can go find that Crisis Punch right at the end of the game. So if your opponent sends up something like a Charizard or just something big, right, that you're just like, even with the Iron Crowns I have, I can't get over, you can do the 280. And I don't know if this is for certain, so I'm sure someone out there will correct me, but I would assume that the Iron Crown's ability to boost 20 damage to your attack applies to the Crisis Punch attack. So you would do, instead of 280, you would do 300, 320, 340, or 360. I could be wrong.
I think it does, because it says it specifically says attacks used by your future Pokemon. Okay. So your future Pokemon uses Crisis Punch with the aid of a TM, but it's still using that attack. So I think you would be able to hit over 300 if you had 2 of these Iron Crowns on field.
So, I mean, for me, there's a benefit there of like, you can effectively, if you have a normal bench, you'll be doing probably 320, 340 most likely damage with this attack instead of 280. 340 is going to knock out most of the normal big Pokemon out there, right? Without any weird modifiers.
Yeah.
You play that, and then that way at the end of the game, you don't have to always worry about having a counter catcher or a prime catcher. Like maybe you've used it earlier in the game to map out your prizes better. So yeah,
do you ever feel like it's difficult though to get those energies on the Miraidon because Electric Generator only goes to lightning Pokemon?
Well, it doesn't have to be on the Miraidon. You can put the onto an Iron Hands.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just that Miraidon's the first thing that gets knocked out. So, but whatever ends up having 3 energy at the end of the game, So I don't know. I think that is another little. It's just one card that you put into Turbo Hands that maybe saves your butt in situations where you don't have a gusting out, but you have a way to knock out the big thing in front of you. So just
how much of an increase do you feel like in the format with stadiums going away? You mentioned that to fit more different consistency items, things like that. How much do you feel like Pokegear becomes more prevalent in decks as the whatchamacallit stadiums go away?
I think certain decks will really like it. I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and I think decks that have extremely specialized needs, like think back to Firebox with Welder, right? The only supporter you cared about was Welder, right? You didn't. You literally
played like 4 Welders, maybe 1 Hapu, and
right,
like in 4 Pokegears.
Yeah. So I think there are a not insignificant number of decks now. Like if you are playing an ancient style deck, whether it's Roaring Moon or maybe Raging Bolt, even you could maybe make an argument.
Snorlax Control.
I could see a world where you have highly specialized decks that have supporters that are just really amazing. And like in my Revolve deck, for instance, right?
Great Tusk.
I mean, yeah, Great Tusk.
Yeah.
So in the Revolve deck that I built though, and my initial thought was like, oh, I'm playing a lot of tools. I really want Arven. In reality, I think I'm going to change it now. But at the time, I was like, I really want Arven, and I don't really want research. I'll just do 4 Arven, 4 Pokegear, 2 Palpad, and that'll be my whole deck, just straight up. That's my whole deck. And you know, Arven's not a great draw supporter. Let's just say that. So even though you can maybe find him sometimes, you could easily get into a situation where you can't find him and there's no way for you to ever get out of that. But, you know, I do agree that Pokegear is without the need for stadiums, that can certainly, you can maybe find your way slotting more of those in. But the main thing I think, honestly, I think people are not playing enough Lost Vacuum. And I think at EUIC, I really believe that you'll see that the top decks are playing at least 1, if not 2 vacuums.
Yeah, I think also decks still playing Arven really, or Pokestop, right? Like Chin Pao or, you know, other like Arven decks really are the ones that are playing the Lost Vacuum because it's so much easier to find either A, when you have Arven, like we mentioned, but if you're Chin Pao and still playing Pokestops, like, all right, when you discard 3, if you see the Lost Vacuum, you're like, okay, get rid of that.
Yeah, I mean, that to your point there, right? Like, Lost Vacuum is a terrible card if you don't have it when you need it. That's the you know, it's
just tough,
right? So
why people played like 3 field blowers back in like 2018,
right? So like, I think that, you know, unless you're going to play a really high count, which I think is a bad idea, but again, I think that just makes cards like Arven that much more valuable. Maybe not as like a 4 of, but as like a solid 2 of supporter, or like we were talking about earlier, Cypher Maniac. If you're playing that in Bibarel, job done, right? Either you can use the Lost Vacuum to get rid of cards in hand so that you can draw more, or you can put the Lost Vacuum on top and then just draw right into it with Bibarel. And like, there's so many ways to find it easily if you build your deck the right way that you know, remember how we used to talk about Tool Scrapper? And people needed to play that.
Oh my God, yes! And then people started playing it.
And I think we're at that moment again for Lost Vacuum. So,
listen, Sean and I have never been wrong before, especially on days that revolve around April Fools. So,
yeah,
better heed our advice if you're looking to play at EUIC or maybe your local events. You know, you can take any of this information and bring it to your local side as well. I think it's always good information, especially in this day and age. So, Sean, do you have any more predictions that you want to go with?
No, I think we've given out all of our weird predictions.
I'm gonna say 3 Lugia in top 8.
Okay, I like that. That's bold.
Cool.
That's a lot.
I really want to knock. I want to knock it down to 2. Actually, I'm gonna knock it down to 2. Maybe 1 Mew VMAX in top 8.
Jake, do you think there's going to be any Gardevoir in top 8?
I don't know. Like I'm really stuck on Gardevoir because Gardevoir I feel like does inherently get worse, right? As with rotation, and I do think he gets hit. But I think anybody who is so dedicated to Gardevoir and is stuck on Gardevoir can still find a way to continuously pilot it. Like I've seen 1 or 2 people, you know, talk about how like in an online tournament or in their testing, and maybe it's just meta manipulation or an April Fool's joke, in like other parts of the country that hit April Fools a lot earlier than us. But they say that Gardevoir is not as bad as people think. It's not as good for sure, but I don't know if one sneaks in, I guess it wouldn't be the most surprising thing in the world, but I wouldn't bet on it if I was betting man.
Yeah. I mean, I would tend to agree with you. I think that again, this is why Gardevoir could sneak in because people aren't paying attention to it. It is a primarily single prize deck that now, with switching to Screamtail and Drifloon and Hero's Cape and all that stuff, can hit crazy numbers. So it's definitely a deck that, like, if somebody sort of finds the right little combination, they might be able to find a way to crack the deck in such a way that people weren't prepared for, which is even more reason to run Lost Vacuum. That deck, I think that Gardevoir deck, it just loses to Lost Vacuum, just straight up.
I don't know. I mean, it like most other not tier 1 deck, the more niche decks, I feel like if you're someone that's just put in enough time and just knows the matchups so well, you can make a run. Sure. Yeah.
Jake, that's all though. That's all I got.
That's all I got too on this April Fool's, but this was no April Fool's episode. It was got a lot of good information. We did have some jokes in there though, so I guess it is due diligence. And I'm sure now on April 2nd, or maybe even April 3rd or 4th, or whenever you listen to this, you're probably tired of hearing about April Fool's, so we'll be done for the day. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I'm Jake. That's Sean over the podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. And we'll see you later.